Hey guys, it's Ted with HDpiano. Here's how to play If I Ain't Got You by Alicia Keys. 1, 2, 3. And that's it for the intro. We're going to be focused on the intro in this lesson section. For the rest of the lesson sections, you can go to hdpiano.com if you're not already there. And we'll learn the verse, chorus, pre-chorus, and I'll give you an expansion pack to talk about how you can improvise a bit using this chord structure, in the same way that I'm sure Alicia Keys was improvising a little bit when she recorded this. But first, let's learn this introduction, which I don't think is improvised at all. You're going to want to play this exactly the same way every time. And I'm going to start by teaching you the chord structure before we get that cool arpeggio pattern. If you can see all of the chord shapes in your mind's eye, this is actually a lot easier than it sounds once you add in that fancy arpeggio thing. So we're in the key of G major, and G major is a pretty easy scale. Even if you're not already familiar, it's all white keys with an F sharp. So you're always going to want to play F sharp instead of F natural. But other than that, you could play around in the key of G major just by playing a bunch of white keys on the piano. And that's the palette of notes that we're drawing from with these chords. We're also walking down the G major scale. So our left hand starts on C, and then it's just going to walk down to G. That's all that's happening. The right hand is playing this chord shape and also walking down. So everything's moving in lockstep or in parallel motion. You're going to see the same shape or the same spacing of intervals in the right and left hands as you move from chord to chord. So start by getting really comfortable with this first chord shape. This is a C major 7, kind of a tongue twister there. And here would be a normal root position C major 7 shape. And to get this shape that we use in the song, you just need to raise this E up an octave and leave everything else in place. And there's your beautiful chord shape. Once you've got that, you can play around with this idea of moving everything down the scale by one note to move things in parallel. So all of those notes just moved to the next note down in the G major scale. This is a B minor 7. And then we move down again, moving down the scale, and we get an A minor 7. One more chord, G major 7. And that's it. Now, the second time through the chord progression, there's one extra thing that happens, which is that when we go from B to the A, in between the B minor 7 and the A minor 7, these two chords, we're going to play chromatically. So instead of going down to the next scale degree, everything is going to move down to the very next available note. And then again, to get to the A minor 7. And it's cool the way that works. The distance between each of these notes in the B minor 7 and these notes in the A minor 7, in every single case, it's going to be 2 half steps. So we're able to move the entire chord down first by 1 half step. That's the very next available note. It's called a half step. And then by another half step, and we get to the A minor. So that's how you get that that cool sound that I'm sure is familiar from this recording. And that's it for the chords in this introduction. So start with the chords. See if you can play through. You could even play along with the recording or with my playthrough without that arpeggio. just so that you're really solid on finding these notes. Because this is an accompaniment pattern on piano that it almost works a little bit the way that guitar often works, where one hand is just responsible for finding the chord shapes, and then the right hand is responsible for creating some sort of rhythmic pattern by picking or strumming. And sometimes the piano works in a similar way, where we're gonna just stay in place on one chord shape, and then within that, we create some sort of rhythmic pattern. And this is a song like that. So once you're really good with these chord shapes, obviously you can do exactly what Alicia Keys did. And if you're playing this song, that's what you're gonna wanna do. But, you know, if you wanted to write your own song with this chord progression, you could keep your hands in exactly the same shape and create a different rhythm. It's the same principle, right? We're just using these chord shapes, and then the rhythm comes second. So now let's look at the rhythm. This song, you could count it in 9/8 or in 3/4. What either of those mean is that there are groups of 3 beats. That's the big division of the rhythm that we feel, that there's one strong beat and then 2 more weaker beats. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And you can feel that there's a stronger emphasis on that first of the 3 beats. And then within those bigger beats, you can hear that there are, again, 3 smaller divisions. 1 and 2 and 3 and... So that's why if you wanted, you could also say that, you know, each of the measures, each of the groupings of beats is actually 9. 3 times 3 is 9. Or you can just call it, this is in 3, and count it in 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I think that's a simpler way to go about it. So that's the basic rhythm here is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then moving on to the next chord. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Here our left hand walks back up. So that's a detail that I left out in the chord overview, but when you're going to the repeat of the chord progression, you can walk up from the G back to the C. We're here, and then we're gonna move back through all those chords we just used to walk back up to C. And we get our left hand down an octave too, which is nice to get that richer sound. Okay, so that's the first time through the chord progression. Second time through is gonna sound like this. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Here's the chromatic part. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So that's it for what you need to learn in this introduction. One tip I have about how to play this physically, if you use a little bit of wrist movement here, it can help to even out the sound between these groups of 3 notes. If you're doing everything in the finger, it can be a little bit harder to make the sound even and controlled because you're dealing with such small, flighty muscles. What we want in order to get a more even sound, always at the piano, is to be using more of the weight of our body. Because your weight, that's just determined by gravity, and it's constant. So if you're ever able to drop the weight of your arm, like make your arm a dead weight and just drop it into the keys and let it be transferred through your hand and your wrist, instead of even tensing and pushing down with your arm, or using some sort of muscular force from your fingers or wrist, that more passive dropping of the weight of your arms into the keys tends to create a more even and controlled sound. So that's our goal here if we want to even out these groups of 3 notes. One way to aid with that is also with this very gentle wrist rotation when you're playing some sort of like broken chord pattern like this. Because what you're wanting to do is transfer that weight of your arm through across your hand. And so if you keep a flexible wrist, it can help a little bit with that transition, transferring that weight from the top of your hand to the bottom. So I'm still thinking arm weight, that's the key, and I'm unlocking that a little bit by keeping my wrist flexible. And you can overdo that, by like really cranking your wrist around. But there's nothing wrong with experimenting with that just to get a feeling for that flexible wrist. And then you can dial it back to where it actually makes sense physically. So that's it for this introduction. Now, the outro of the song is exactly the same, but at the very end, we have this little flourish. So we're coming down. This is the end of the song. We arpeggiate this chord like this. And then, I'm sure you remember from the recording, that little chromatic run she does at the end. And that's what that looks like. Okay, great job on part 1. If you're on HDpiano.com already, you can click on the next video. If you're not, head on over so you can keep going with this song. If there's another song you want to learn, send us your ideas at requests.hdpiano.com. You can follow us on social media for a heads up about new lessons. And if you're on YouTube, drop us a comment because we love hearing from you. I'm Ted with HDpiano.com. Until next time.